Cool. So we're here in Tortuga inaugural book club session 5, where we sped things up, and so we finished the end of section 3, which is the end of chapter 10, which is like, I mean, I don't know about you guys. Dion said he didn't finish it, but I don't know if Roland you did, and I know Bobby finished the book. It was like one of the most heartbreaking.
Things got really lively.
Things are going so well, and it's like, oh, cool, my heart just ripped in half. That's nice. I'm just gonna go around the rest of my the rest of my week feeling like I got punched in the gut. Okay. So,
well, let's rip the Band-Aid off. Hit me with it. What happened?
Yes, at the end didn't completely finish, but I'll say this: Tom dies, and we'll let you figure out. Unless we discuss it here, we'll let you figure on your read for your own the gruesome way in which it occurs.
Okay, I will say, don't hold anything back for me.
Okay.
If you don't need to get into a detail for a particular, that doesn't have anything, sure, but I don't want anyone hold. I got very close. I just didn't quite finish. So
yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, Sam, I got to the third section of chapter 10, and then I ran out of time because stuff happened at my job. But yeah,
we can keep it then. Most of the discussion sequestered to before towards section 3. That's fine. But before we get into that, Roland Barnacle, I think you wanted to make a presentation on how Anglos are like the supreme purveyors of wine or something like this.
Yeah. I'm going to kind of go into the history. It seemed like I kind of misinterpreted a little bit what was told, but I was directionally right. So you want me to share my screen and get started?
Go ahead. We'll do that.
Okay, so the what you basically call the culture, or basically the way and process of like making vineyards, choosing grapes, and growing stuff is called viticulture. It's kind of a funny name, and the first vintners, winemakers, and stuff like that were found in Tbilisi, Georgia, in around 6000 BC. Other stuff popped up in around Iran, Bulgaria, Greece, and Sicily. The first alcohol we ever found is in China, if you're curious about that. It tasted pretty horrible. Basically, it was all vinegary. It was just nasty. It was usually in animal hides, just nasty. But technically safer most of the time than water. So that's just what people did. For Catholicism, it was important for the different Bible stories, communion, stuff like that. There's some kind of interesting symbolism if you want to read about that. The main purveyors and the people that started really getting into wine were different monks. And the reason they were able to do that is because they were building large monasteries. The first major group that was going through and really starting to scientifically start to break down how to grow wine, what's the best kind of grapes to use, and for which type of soil, all that sort of stuff, are the Benedictines. Now, if you don't know who those guys are, these are kind of these followers of Saint Benedict. They are kind of very, very sort of, to put kind of in modern terms, they're kind of how a lot of Catholics are now. They're kind of fluid. They party, they drink, and then they go to confessional, confess to all their sins, but they're kind of a little more fluid. They were sort of the main group of monks at the time, and they were usually pretty open, and they ended up creating a lot of different monasteries that were basically universities, is how it was described to me. Most Catholics were like that during the 9th century, and their most powerful monastery is this picture here, Abbey Cluny in Burgundy, founded in 1910, which, I don't know, I just thought that building looked really, really cool. They usually were kind of a little more flowery in sort of the classic Catholic sense. But then, like with everything with the church, there was the reactionaries. And of course, they had to go the complete opposite, which was basically going super minimalist. So getting rid of everything fancy, restricting just like everything. And I mean, like just almost a pre-Luther like breakaway. But they're still followers of Benedict, but they are hardcore followers of Benedict. So just to give you kind of context, during the time of the book, even though Ken doesn't really like get into this, majority of Catholic monks are mostly going to be Benedictines. These are going to be archbishops, the guys that basically run the church in England for the most part. Right, the Cistercians, the splinter group, are reactionaries, are slowly starting to build power in the background, but Ken doesn't really get into that at all. But hardcore minimalists, they basically become kind of the set standard for how to recognize what's good wine. Well, by the 15th century, most of Europe recognized them as that. And the difference is that they were the critic and tastemakers. They made wine for a while until the 15th century when I'm told a mini ice age happened, and that basically just like ruined all of the crops that were on the southern part of England and just made it near impossible to grow stuff. But one of the main reasons why monks were so successful when it came to doing wine is they thought in centuries were not seasons. Basically, they didn't have to worry about passing on usable soil to like an heir so that they can make money. It was kind of part of their nonprofits. They owned large amounts of land, so they had a lot of different places to experiment. I believe, where's my note on this? I think in England, they had like 50 different wineries at some point. Where is that?
Wow.
Yeah, or vineyards, sorry, in south of England. And so they were very, very large and very influential. They also were the most literate, so they also kept good records, and they were probably using a strong amount of the scientific method to figure out how to grow grapes, where to kind of get them, and how much water, topography, all of that sort of kind of like minor detail stuff. This was also one of the few things that they were allowed to do to create surplus wealth, because you kind of get this in the book, but they don't want to have a ton of extra stuff. They want to make sure they're giving it away. So they tried very hard to sort of like use that as the way for them to get extra money, basically. They were able to spread geographically because they were just all over Europe, all over the place. They also had a very strong need to have constantly unspoiled wine. At this time, they used tree sap, or later they ended up using tree sap to be able to preserve the wine longer, but they hadn't found that, so they had to constantly keep making wine to keep everything going. Let's see here. There's a kind of a fun little thing about how the West Church, or the Catholics versus the Orthos, fought over if they could actually use wine for a certain amount of time. Then they eventually agreed to do it, and the West Church specifically used white and Eastern used red, if you're curious about that. And then the types of wine, the only one that was able to
from.
Say what?
Do you have to know where that came from?
The West, no, I don't. I was kind of running out of time, so I was just tossing notes on here, but I will like throw. Yeah. I can throw sources and get a little more detail here when I toss it in the chat later.
It'd be interesting if it had anything to do with the War of the Roses. I doubt it, but
maybe.
First thing that
would make
jumped into my
sense.
head. But go on.
Yeah, that would make a lot of sense. All right. So Mavasia is the aromatic medieval wine, sweeter tasting, less vinegary, I guess. And for the most part, when people were drinking wine, it's mostly going to be for the upper classes. The first press is going to be usually for royalty. If peasants are ever going to drink it, it's going to be a specific type called pichet, which is just basically watered down wine. It was very much kind of rare to get. And I think this is kind of the wine that a lot of the monks would give their patrons who would come through or need a place to stay. But for the most part, I think for England, they specifically just drink wine. And we see that a lot in the book too. Oh yeah, and another reason why they were so successful with creating wine up here that I forgot to write down is that if they had better wine, they would basically get more patronage. So more peasants and people would come through and go to churches and get their sins taken care of, all of that fun stuff. So medieval versus modern, for the most part, monks just did traditional fermentation, but still kind of tasted like shit. And England basically for a while was just the ultimate critic when it came to wine. Even though France was kind of the head during the 1900s, England still was like kind of the tastemakers of it. They were kind of the New York, I guess, of wine. Yeah. That switched over actually in the 1970s. I forgot to write this down, but it switched to America actually being the tastemakers because California wine is specifically thought of to be one of the best wines in the whole world. And so a lot of the critics and thought leaders in the venti culture ended up moving and mostly working in America. So yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny. I've gone wine tasting in Napa, and I mean, I'm not a wine person per se, but it's quite good. So it's interesting to imagine that that's like the quality of stuff that was being produced by all these monasteries.
Yeah, it's insane. And yeah, there's a ton of interesting details about that. But yeah, I'll toss that on later. And if you guys want to go back through it, and I'll also drop sources and stuff like that, so you can like really get in depth if you're curious. But yeah, that's it.
Before they went under, Silicon Valley Bank had a bunch of different divisions, and one of the divisions was Silicon Valley Bank Agriculture, which existed not to bankroll agriculture startups. It existed basically just to run vineyards for retired executives. Basically, everybody who decided that it was going to be their thing once they had made their huge pile of swag to move to Napa, buy a vineyard, and set up their own particular brand of wine, would go to their preferred bank, take a loan out against their private stock, and set up a vineyard. And for years, and something like 6 or 7 years, this was one of Silicon Valley Bank's leading divisions. Because after the dot-com crash, it was a source of big lending for them.
Is that where the Coppola wine came from? Is that where he got his big loan? Do you know?
Probably not, because he was because he made most of his money in Hollywood as opposed to Silicon Valley.
Oh, okay.
But
yeah,
but it could have been. I don't know. But there are a whole lot of people who, frankly, have made a whole lot of bad wine. I've been up and down through a number of different vineyards and distilleries, and but some of them are quite fine, and some of them are just people retired and did this, and mostly they did it for a few years and decided, oh, this really isn't for me, but it seemed like it was going to be fun. But that was one of the many assets on the books when SVB went under, that they had all these various different holdings for various different execs who had decided that this was going to be their big thing.
For sure, yeah. Raj, what were you saying?
I think it's really funny how basically because there's because of the Christian religion, there's all these like bans on all these different ways to like gather and allocate money. There develops all these alternatives to build wealth.
Yeah, that was another one of the things.
After like 6 of these random inventions, you might think to like lift some of the, requirements.
Yeah. So yeah, weirdly enough, wine was considered a important religious agricultural product by the church. So it was very important to keep it going and using. So that's how they were kind of able to weave through it. There's I think they just allowed beer up in England just because water is water in the medieval times, and so there really wasn't much choice. But yeah.
Cool. Thanks. This is fun to hear. All right. Well, I just came back from an international trip, so I didn't have a lot of time to create a Notion page, or to get out things. But after briefly reviewing the stuff that's gone on, so I think where we left off last time is Alina and Richard had made their oath to their father, to get back the estate, and they were lucky to run into Philip, who is willing to do this kind of weird scheme on like unsold wool.
Yeah.
Which I think someone had brought up. Like, I don't know how historically accurate that is, but it is another point of like, oh, look at how to like go around this like money thing.
Yeah.
And of
The Florentines did it about 150 years later, and it got somehow approved as a way to get around the usury laws, but even at the time it was considered to be highly dubious. So I'm not sure that Philip would have said, "Oh, this is totally legit." But
yeah,
eventually, the Pope got around to thinking it was fine. But well, that's because Florence
I kind of
was
want
a
to.
great deal of money.
It would be really funny.
Anyway, go on.
I think it'd be really funny to like bring Philip to modern times and be like, "Oh yeah, so like not only do we have like all of these debt mechanisms, but then we like compile them into collateralized debt obligations. Sell those.
Mortgage derivatives.
We sell those to institutions. There are like basically gambling markets on who you think is going to end up with the collateral after all of the threats are untangled. And that's like what a good like, I don't know, 40, 50, 80% of how our financial system works now.
It's fucking wild.
It's like really crazy to think about that. It's like people are betting on like once shit hit the fans and you have to sort out all the IOUs, like who's actually gonna end up with this stuff. And if you get the bet correct on who gets the most screwed over, you win lots of money.
Assuming that I can actually pay you. Bear Stearns doesn't explode when they try to.
Yeah, that feels very American to bet on debts. High risk, high return, fucking over the next guy. Yeah, that feels very American.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what all the frat boys are trained to do.
Exactly.
So it's cool because we see like Alina starting to like run her business and things like that. And then of course, like I think the main arc of all of what's happening here throughout this section is like these ongoing battles between Philip and Kingsbridge and the Earl of and of course Mr. Walleron here, who is he's so casual about his power hungriness. It doesn't care. He's like, yeah, I'm in it for me. I don't give a fuck. Super casual about it.
I want to mention real quick that I was totally vindicated about Richard.
Yeah.
What did you say? Can you remind?
There was a general sentiment that he was maybe kind of a hapless idiot and looming behind, and his sister was kind of looming over him as like the competent one.
Yeah.
And I felt like, you know, he's 14. I wasn't much to be excited about at 14. And I felt like the novel was kind of hinting that we're going to see Richard bloom and become a man. And it was very nice to get that payoff in the beginning of part 3.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, vengeance is a powerful motivator. I think one of the big things that's like upsetting that happens is basically Stephen. So originally the deal for the stuff was negotiated with Stephen, and then Stephen loses his throne. And so now they have to renegotiate things with Maud. Is that her name?
Yes.
Wild name.
And she seems like a lovely, sweet woman.
Yes, very caring, very feminine.
Yeah. I'm kind of convinced to like write an article about the only reason that Anglican society allowed female monarchs is because kind of ruthless, and you know, you wouldn't think they're beautiful, wonderful women. And given that's the case, all right, we'll let them be monarchs. No big deal. As well as the men.
Yeah.
And so then Maud gives a lot more stuff to William in the deal. And so William is able to steal back workers, and Philip has to go and try to win them back. And, you know, just the ongoing drama and how Philip seems to keep besting him at every turn, and William seems to get more insolent, and then he goes and rapes and pillages to deal with his anger. And then he goes back to Waller on his like, he feels really guilty, and Waller's like, okay, I forgive you. Let's keep moving on. It's just like, my goodness.
Very Catholic, very funny. Yeah, I one point I do want to point out is I liked the idea that they did where they basically, when Philip originally goes and takes the quarry because they agreed to share it, but then of course William and his family shut that down. The way that they did that was pretty clever. I really didn't have an idea of how they were going to do it, but of them basically going, yeah, I fucking dare you to cut down a bunch of monks when we're taking these stones. Fucking dare you.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to the fact where I'm a little bit shell shocked because, like, you have someone like William, who like is, capable of doing all of these like horrifying things, and like he feels so good about it, but then he feels like a level of like remorse and devotion that is like very atypical for anyone at all, even if they're religious in modern times.
Yeah.
Something about
Do you read it as remorse?
I mean, I think he feels like generally quite terrible, and he is afraid of going to hell.
I
Right?
think he's just afraid of hell.
Okay.
I don't think he feels bad about what he's done.
Oh,
I think he just doesn't want to go to hell, and hellfire and hell scares him. That's at least how I take him out of you guys.
I mean, you don't consider that like a genuine form of devotion?
I think you can be really afraid of hell, but not necessarily care about the things you've done. You're afraid of the effect of your actions, not.
He just doesn't want to be punished.
Yeah, he just doesn't want to be punished. Yeah, I don't think he actually feels bad about anything he's done. In
Mhm.
fact, I mean, when it comes to his sexual tastes, that's the only way he can get off, apparently.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think though that's probably also just a cultural thing of the time. Like it's like since church is already culture, and we see in the book a lot Philip making mentions of different peasants and other people showing up who kind of are just fuck ups, and they take sort of the free food and wine or beer at the monastery, and then just kind of don't even try to really be religious outside of that. So I think that's kind of is a pretty natural mentality to have at that time. There's very few Phillips, if that makes sense.
I can't make any demographic claims about that time personally, but yeah, I can only speak for William in that I feel that he doesn't really care about the things he's doing. But
Yeah, and the funny thing too is that like it's weird like what he gets scared by. Like he'll be like super like puffing out his chest, and like 3 sentences that Walleron says and he becomes like a little kitty. Or like Philip says some offhand comment and he like scurries away like a rabbit. It's like very strange to me. Like
Yeah.
I think I don't know, like where I go to is like, with modern like imaging and AI and data analysis, I kind of want to understand the neurotype better, for something like that.
mama's boy energy.
Don't you feel like he's a victim of child abuse?
Possible, I suppose. Like from who? His father or his mother, or both?
Well, both.
Hmm.
Right. I mean, his mother very much browbeats the both of them, right? The father and him.
Hmm.
I think it's probably be more like verbal and mental abuse more than anything. Like, I mean, he's always talking about feeling like he's not a man. Like when he goes to that village to show that he's the big man and people need to be scared of him. Like that's his internal monologue the whole time. Is he's basically like it's basically like a social conspiracy theorist where he just thinks everyone does everything to just in spite of him. Like he's just kind of the central character in everyone's minds. They're doing it just to fuck him over and not just because, oh, we want a mill so that we can have better bread and better access and stuff like that. Yeah, I think it's definitely probably closer to more verbal than sexual, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that maybe that's what makes him really enjoy battle and stuff like that, right? Because, it's a time where he can really demonstrate his power in a way that hopefully people can't. Like he's able to win Stephen's favor by showing up with the army, and then Stephen's like, okay, Philip, our conversation is done. And that's kind of the way William would like to operate. This is something I talked about in the Tortuga stand-up, which is that there are people who believe that law should be derived from morality, and people who think law should be derived from power, and then people who think law should be derived from utility. And there's always the kind of fight between these groups, right? The utility people, think let's just do what gets us the most, stonks go up type thing, right? And then morality is like, well, we get to be in charge of determining what is right and wrong, and power is just like, well, I'm just gonna get my guys together and slit your throat, kind of dealio.
Yeah.
I think, obviously, in any healthy society, you have all of these, and I think the biggest thing, when you get like propagandized in public school about checks and balances in the U.S. Constitution and how that comes from Montesquieu and all of that, like, I think this is like a formalization of those ideas. I think like the relevant case today is, for example, like the academy in modern America seems to believe that it is like above reproach in any regards. So if it wants to determine like the law or how things should be interpreted or how society should be run, like it doesn't need regulation from like the Senate or the Supreme Court or industry or any other people. It will decide to pursue its whatever intersectional aims. And if you try to go and stand up against them, then you are considered a fascist because you don't understand the program. That's like an example of, like, in our case, where checks and balances have become way out of hand.
So we just need to teach the spirit of the laws more. I'm jesting.
Yeah, right.
But kind of somewhat related to what you're talking about, Rajiv, that I found interesting is, and it's very apt, germane to today's sort of environment. There's just a quick little passage I took. I take screenshots as I read on the iPad, and it's just right here. It says, William would have liked to disagree with her, but he's talking to his mom. But he knew she was right. In the end, the king would probably give the earldom to the man who promised to be the most effective supporter, regardless of the rights or wrongs of the case. That's not all, Mother went on. You must take care to look and act like an earl. That way, the king will start to think of the appointment as a foregone conclusion. And I thought this was really interesting because at this time, we talked about this maybe in the first or second book club, especially in this time, there isn't as much of a delineation between the perception of power and power. The guy with the biggest army generally is the most powerful.
Mm-hmm.
But this is an instance that's kind of showing where it's not always about actually just having the power. It's about having the status of power, about seeming powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Perception versus reality. And I just think that's really apt today, where that divorce is basically, we can't really, there is almost no direct connection between the two. So much of our perceived reality is perceived. It's the perception that someone else is giving you of whatever it is they are, rather than, and we're not always able to figure out, is this real? Is it not? And this was just an interesting instance of, in this time, this still applied.
Yeah, and like the biggest thing too, I mean, if you read like a lot of sort of like Machiavellian-esque type things, right? It's like, oh, well, the best way to deal with this type of anarchy is to fuck up other people's signals about predator and prey. Because if they can't tell whether you're predator or prey, you can basically come in and start fucking shit up according to what you want to do, right? And you look at a lot of the ways that, algorithmically especially, that are designed to do that, and otherwise, that's like these are what power players do to try to impose their will. What did you guys think about the depiction of the war between Stephen and Maud?
That was a sick scene. I loved that. This is one of the props I want to give to Ken when he describes battles. A lot of times when I've read them in books before, it kind of is kind of easy to get lost in sort of what's happening, but he does such a great job of making it relatively easy to follow, gives you like distinct points, and gives you just a geographical idea on what's happening. And also the way that he chose the point of view of Philip to be watching it from up top so that he gets the bird's eye view. great move. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, the thing that I always think about now is like there are all these people wearing this like chainmail and helmets and wielding the swords. It's like, how do you not fucking get tired after like 7 minutes?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You get on your horse and let them do all the work.
It's like, yeah, and they're marching to like 10 miles with all of their shit, and they have the spears and all of that. And it's like, good grief. How much?
Yeah.
But here I was thinking I'm strong because, I went and did like 2.5 hours of kickboxing this morning. And like, good grief. Do you guys have other commentary on the actual battle?
I have a little bit about like afterwards when Philip is kind of running through the streets trying to save people.
Mm.
I really like that scene a lot. That was I like that he was having flashbacks to his childhood at the same time, and so there's this extreme desperation to try to save people. Him trying to like break up a rape while it's happening, trying his best even though he doesn't have a weapon to keep people from dying, and it kind of drills down the constant theme, which is that this is just a very, very aggressive, violent world, and violence is just so normalized in a way, and it's very hard as a single individual to be able to kind of keep it at bay, even if you try your best, even if you're literally throwing yourself in front of people and all you've got is basically just a wool coat as protection. It's just yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because people, nowadays, or I don't know, like there's all the rage of like, slave morality, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, there's a scene where the army goes to the Jew and they're like, give me your gold. And he's like, I don't have any gold. And he's like, give me your fucking gold. Okay, it's in the back. Just wife and kid alone, blah, blah. And then he like goes away and it's like, well, slave morality's not sounding so bad.
Yeah. For real, yeah.
I mean, in contrast between like Philip, who maybe hasn't been exposed to that as much, again, he grew up in the middle of the woods with his little brothers and like seeing how this is what life is in the anarchy in this period of time.
Oh yeah.
It's,
those formative years of, at age 5, right?
Yeah, he did get a taste of it as a child.
Yeah, of course, but
yeah, I mean, like an individual experience where you watch your parents get killed is pretty rough, but when you're watching it happen to a bunch of different people who are just there, they're not actually, the main stake is that they just live and make money in the city, and that they have to be loyal to the king, and they're going to suffer for the king making a bad choice to run out when the battle was, at least at the beginning, kind of mostly even, and then it completely just kind of falls apart once they get in there because they kind of don't really know who they're fighting against and sort of the types of enemies, and also the fact that it seems like 2/3 of his armies were just mercenaries, which kind of feels like probably a bad idea to have if that's your main stakeholder of power. Is you have to hire mercenaries to come and fight for you. Usually that shows that you're kind of not as powerful, at least in this time period, as you think.
Wasn't Machiavelli a big critic of mercenaries, if I remember when I read The Prince? Anyone recall?
Yes, but he didn't have a lot of choice in that era either.
Well, I remember him critiquing mercenaries for that. The main reason being they're just not loyal.
Mm-hmm.
Right? When the fight really gets desperate, they're just going to run. They're not,
Yeah.
The stake is they get paid, and that's all they really care about. So
I could be wrong about this, but wasn't that during the time when wars were kind of like they were mainly fought between like lords, and it wasn't the full like nation state stuff that we see today? Is that historically correct?
So, as to my understanding, not really actually.
Okay.
For the most part, it would be like peasant soldiers that were fighting while lords commanded. And this was apparently a big shift in the Battle of Agincourt way later in the 100 Years' War, where the English were able to basically massacre a bunch of French nobles. And I think at that point, I think crossbows had really become powerful at that time, and that's when that shifted. But to my knowledge, as a lord, you probably were more likely to die basically losing the battle and being captured and hung or whatever, to my knowledge.
Okay.
So you were also more likely to get ransomed.
That too.
Because someone would pay for you. Whereas, in many cases, if you're a peasant, who cares, right?
Right.
So, moving on, finally, Alina has found a man she's willing to have feelings for the first time ever.
Yeah.
All the other men are not good enough, but now there's this one very poetic, intelligent guy, soft hands, as they would say, and she's quite taken by him. Please discuss if you'd like.
Oh yeah. Our resident word cell, Jack.
Right.
Literally me.
Yeah.
Really funny. I love how too like Tom is like, oh, Jack is such a nuisance because he's doing all these clever things, but at least he's more interested in the actual building than my own son Alfred. Brains.
Oh yeah. That was a funny scene when after the women did their race for whatever holiday they were doing, and like Ellen and Alina are just laying there talking. Alina's trying to get her clothing business started with Ellen, and then Alfred just sits down and he's like, "Where are those? We need a stone church." And they're like, "What?" And he's like, "We need to make a stone church." And then Ellen had to like kind of like pull it out of him, and then Alina had to like guide him to like making the stone Masons Guild and shit like that. That was kind of funny. That was his intro move, his Riz, top Riz.
Yeah. And I mean, we haven't got to the point yet, but like the thing is that, her quote unquote introduction to romance in the male body, Alina's, was quite terrible.
Yeah, not ideal.
And so the question is, to what degree she's actually willing to let herself fall in love and be vulnerable.